Good morning, everyone. I'm early enough that Kitty is running his zoomies right now, so you may hear him. I'm encouraging him to do that. The more he runs, the longer he'll sleep. Cats spend most of their time sleeping, and when they are awake, they spend all of it rushing around, which is what he's doing. All right. The title for today is The Way I See It. When I talk, I often use references. I like to use references from movies because somebody's already done the work to create an example for everybody, so I don't have to do that. I don't do a lot of visual aids here. I'm not like, what's his name, Breaker with the whiteboard. I don't have that. I don't have videos. I don't play music because I have to fight the copyright stuff. Kitty, stop bumping into stuff. So I use movie references because I am a big movie fan. Kitty, stop it. I gotta fix this so he quits bumping it. Okay. Sorry for that. I think it was Carol Burnett said when she first came to Hollywood, her and her mother would hang out on at Hollywood and Vine, Sunset Strip. Traditional names. I lived off of Sunset Strip on Sunset Plaza Drive at one point in time. Actually, Belfast was a little cul-de-sac up on the end. Houses on the hills. I don't know if those are still there after these fires. I think those were safe, because that was the Hollywood Hills and not Pacific Palisades. My aunt's house, if it was still standing, would have been burned up in the Palisades fire. All right. So I was raised differently than most people are raised, and I look at things differently. And I raise my boys the same way, and I talk to them openly and honestly. We didn't live in a fantasy world. Santa Claus was real in the form of Saint Nick. The version that we see was created by Coca-Cola. I can watch a movie, and I talk about this, about watching Harry Potter. They say, you got to be careful, it's got witches in it. I know it's entertainment. There really are witches capable of. They would be demonic, but they still would be capable of. So you can't just completely shut the door on knowledge. You just have to learn to anticipate. I'm not saying to go out and watch a porn movie. That's atrocious. Or something's totally satanic, where that's all they want to do is indoctrinate you. I'm not talking about that. But there are plenty of films. The Wizard of Oz has witches in it. It has a good witch and a bad witch. The good witch says only bad witches are ugly. That's fiction. It was directed by a namesake, Alexander Fleming, who was also working on Gone with the Wind. Also fiction, so frankly, I don't give a darn. In any case, I watched movies. Carol Burnett and her mother would hang out looking for stars, and they would go to a movie, 3 or 4 movies a week, I think she said. At that time, it was probably a nickel, which was probably a lot of money back then. I know that houses, as I was growing up, were $3,000 to $10,000. That wouldn't even be a down payment today. Cars were $500 to $800. You could get a good one for $200. So, I like Star Trek. It's talking about a happy future where we all get along. It's, again, fiction. We're not going to see that. It's sad, but we're not going to see that. There's a big problem right in the middle of that happy ending. and then God's going to destroy the planet and we're going to get a new one. But I also like Star Wars too, and it's got the dark side in it. It's a good versus evil. So is Harry Potter a good versus evil? There's a basic theme that's okay in it. I watched every Roadrunner cartoon ever made, I think, as a kid. I have yet to drop an anvil on anybody. You learn what's real and what's not. It's not a matter of propaganda or being trained. These are fictional stories, somebody's imagination. I wrote my own Star Trek fan film, and I made it, and it's up there online. It's fiction. So as long as we understand that, when I reference these things, if you can't handle it, then don't look at it. We'll get into some scriptures here in a little bit that kind of back up what I'm saying. If I know my audience, and my audience is going to be offended by it, everyone, I won't talk about it. At least that way. If it's in the Bible, I have to talk about it. But I won't make it a point to dwell on something that's going to bother everybody. However, I will discuss things and I will compare things. When I was young, my mother could see I was inquisitive. And I talked to God long before I became a Christian. So I knew God was out there. I just didn't know anything about him. So in helping me with that, my mother was not a religious person. She didn't go to church. My dad didn't go to church. I think they'd probably been, 3 or 4 times in their life, maybe to a funeral or to a wedding, and that would be it. My dad was a nice guy for the most part, but they were worldly. And I don't know if my mother was saved. She didn't ever want to talk about it. My dad never really wanted to talk. I didn't talk with either one of them very much because I didn't talk back then. So I don't know. My dad had a lot of people around him that were Christians, so I'm hoping that somebody got to him towards the end. But he didn't live here. My mom, I brought her out here, but by the time I brought her out here, she was senile. I couldn't discuss anything with her. She wouldn't remember it. She had no short-term memory. So, in trying to further my education, she tried the best she could. Neither one of my parents, I don't think my mom went to high school. My dad did, but didn't finish. Because they're Depression-era kids. They had to go to work. But she tried to help me out. She bought an encyclopedia set. I'm in the 60s. I graduated high school in 72, so 60s and 70s. She bought me an Encyclopedia Britannica set. It probably cost her $3 at the Goodwill store where she got it. She loved to shop there because of her Depression-era frugalness. It was copyrighted, published in 1936. It didn't even have the atomic bomb in it. And we were atomic bomb afraid at the time. It was the Cold War, and we were worried about Russia putting missiles in Cuba. But anyhow, she sent me to various places to study. One, to get me out of her hair. Because I was, why is the sky blue? Are we there yet? I talked about that in my last video. I was one of those. I didn't talk that much, but when I talked, it was questions, and I wanted them answered. So I learned to investigate everything. I took apart pretty much anything I could. I'd take the clock apart. I'd take the TV apart. I'd take everything apart. And I eventually got to where I could put them back together, much to my parents' pleasure. And so I learned all this stuff about them by just simply exploring. And that's why I like to do when I'm hiking, I explore. When I'm playing a video game, I explore more than I do play the game. I love to do that. But, and of course when the TVs were there, I was the remote. Later on, my sister took that over. Okay, so she would enroll me in classes, and the classes would be any place that was teaching something, whether it's the why, Most of the time she'd send me to some form of church. Not knowing any church background, I think the first place she sent me was to a Catholic church to take catechism. I had too many whys. Why this, why that? How come this is this way? And I guess I got on their nerves and they said, this probably isn't for you, is it? Since they weren't willing to answer their doctrine. If you can't answer why something is, you shouldn't be teaching it. And eventually, I ended up going to a synagogue to learn Hebrew, the basics. I can't read much anymore, but I could read for a little while. But I learned the Aleph Bet. The first two letters of the Hebrew alphabet are Aleph and Bet. So, anyhow, I watch my audience when I can, and I will occasionally get somebody complain here about me talking and referencing something, but as long as it's minimal, I'll apologize and continue with what I'm doing. So, we're going to learn a little bit about Peter and his dream. Early on, they were spreading Christianity through a predominantly Jewish area. Jesus came for the Jews. Peter came for the Jews too initially. But it was taught to him through a vision that you got to be careful and that anything God created is okay. So, continuing on with the story, they did some other stuff, but we're going to do Acts 10:9. You can read what happened before it if you want. What are you into, Kitty? When he goes silent, he's into something because he knows sound carries now. I had to tape up a panel. In a trailer, there's access panels to everything, and there's a little Velcro panel that went under the shower so you could get to it. I guess to change the drain and things like that, or work on the lines. He managed to pop that off and got inside of there yesterday, and there's no way I could reach him. I shook the little treat can, and he came running out. Then I closed it up, blocked it, and then this morning I taped it up. All right, so I got to keep him from getting into stuff. Most of the access panels have screws in them holding them in. This one had Velcro, and he was able to pull it down. Curiosity killed the cat. Got to be careful. He's standing on top of Alexa again. Get off of that. You're not supposed to be there. That's why there's stuff there. Alexa, are you okay?
I'm lacing up my sneakers and getting ready for some NBA action. To join me on the court, just say, start the NBA theme.
Well, I'm not going to do that. I was never into basketball. I couldn't play basketball. I tried. I couldn't dribble. I didn't focus on that. We all played around with shooting hoops and stuff like that, but I could never play. I was more of a single-person sport, like running or skiing or something like that, or tennis, because back then I was young enough that I could play singles. Now, if I could play, it'd be doubles. I don't want to play until my knee's fixed. So anyhow, on the morrow, as they went on their journey, because they had been traveling, they drew nigh into the city, and Peter went on the housetop to pray about the 6th hour. You'll notice that there's a pattern here. People that get visions usually get them when they're praying. If you're not getting visions, learn to pray more. Kitty, hang on a second. Get off of there. Get off of there. I have a wind chime to put up. I just got the thing unraveled from being packed, and he was going to mess it up. I have to get out there and put it up someplace, so I'll look today to find a good spot to hang it. Okay, so he's on the housetop praying, and he became very hungry and would have eaten, but while they made ready, he fell into a trance. So they were still fixing the meal. He wasn't able to eat. He fell into a trance and saw heaven opened up and a certain vessel descending on him, as it had been a great skeet or sheet knit at the four corners and let down upon the earth, wherein were all manners of four-footed beasts of the earth, wild beasts, creeping things, fowls of the earth. And there came a voice to him, Rise, Peter, kill and eat. And Peter said, Not so, Lord. I have never eaten anything that is common or unclean. And the voice spake unto him again, saying a second time, What God has cleansed, that call not thou common. So, if God has created it and blessed it, it's not common, you can have it. So you can pretty much eat anything you want, but we'll get into the end of that in a second. This was done thrice, and the vessel was received up again into heaven. Now, why Peter doubted himself what this vision which he had seen should mean, behold, the men were sent from Cornelius, had made inquiry for Simon's house, and stood before the gate. That's Peter's other name. And called and asked whether Simon, which was surnamed Peter, was lodged there. While Peter thought on the vision, the Spirit came unto him, Behold, 3 men seek thee. Arise therefore, and go get thee down with them, doubting nothing, for I have sent them. Then Peter went down to the men which were sent to him from Cornelius, and said, Behold, I am he whom they seek. What is the cause wherefore that you are coming? And they said, Cornelius the centurion, a just man, and one of the fearest God, and of good report among all the nations of the Jews, was warned from God by a holy angel to send for 3 into his house, and to hear words of thee. Then called him in, and he lodged with them. And on the morrow Peter went away with them, and the certain brethren from Joppa accompanying him. And the morrow after they entered Caesarea, and Cornelius waited for them. He had called them together, his kinsmen and near friends. And as Peter was coming, Cornelius met him and fell down at his feet and worshipped him. But Peter took him up, saying, Stand up, I myself am a man. You've seen where angels have done the same thing. And as he talked with him, he went in and found that they may come together. And he said unto them, You know, for a man that is a Jew to keep company and come into one another's nation, but God has showed me that I should not call any man common or unclean. So, there's a double-edged sword here. The one thing, Jews and Gentiles, you can't separate them. Kitty, don't you go back there, you're going to get in trouble. I'll lock you in the bedroom. I have to get that up today or before he... Cats are persistent. Once you tell them no, then they want to know why. And they will go back to that time and time again until they figure out, it's nothing, I'm bored. Move on. Okay. So, Jews and Gentiles, they're the same. But food is the same. It has a double-edged meaning. You can eat any food. God created everything. However, Romans 14:20. All things indeed are pure, but it is evil for that man who eateth with offense. It is good neither to eat flesh, nor to drink wine, nor anything that thy brother stumbleth, or is offended, or is made weak. Hast thou faith? Have it to thyself before God. So basically, you can do anything you want within the realm of what God has created and wants us to do. I've mentioned the things we don't do, but you can eat anything. Everybody's the same. It doesn't matter what color, what race, where you're from, what language, what accent. We're all the same in God's eyes. We can't understand people like that sometimes, but they're all the same. I've got a crow walking. There's 3 crows right out here looking for food in the morning here. If you'd get up here, Kitty, you'd see where they're at and you'd be able to watch them. Come on, get up here. There he is. Okay, so there's Kitty. Here, go look at the crows. See him? Yep, he's got them. He'd like to go out and play with them, but they'd probably tear him up. So the bottom line is, whatever you're dealing with in life, do your best to try to get the message out and to help people. And if you find something bothers somebody, don't do it in front of them. Don't be secretive. Just don't make it a point of doing it when they're there to watch. I eat shellfish. I eat lobster. I eat clams, oysters. I love that. It's not on the approved list. And for good reason. They can be dangerous. You don't eat in with a month with an R in it. They're bottom feeders. They clean up the waste at the bottom, which can also include toxic sand, nuclear energy, anything that might be out there that's bad. These creatures clean it up. So it depends on where you go. I never, when I would collect clams myself, I didn't do it in a populated urban beach area. I'd go to a secluded area where it was got some filtering better. Lobster I used to get. When I was down in San Diego, I'd go and get abalone. You can't get that anymore in California. I don't think the water underneath any California beach is any better than a moonscape. The best place for lobster that I ever found was when I was stationed in the Philippines. I'd go diving there and bring up 15-pound lobster, 3 or 4 at a time. Now, I was in the Navy, so I had to take him to the cook on the base to cook. But he was happy to receive them and would fix a meal for everybody that would be there. And he'd fix all the sides to go with it, corn, potatoes, whatever. And all I had to do is just bring them to him. I did that until I got into town. We couldn't leave the base initially. It was under martial law. But eventually they opened it. I went into town and had a steak and lobster dinner at the best restaurant in Manila. 95 cents. It wasn't even worth my time at that point to go diving to bring them back up. I bought an underwater camera and tried to take pictures. They all came out terrible. I sold the camera when I got back. I wasn't a photographer. Anyhow, do everything you do with the good of others in mind. Be considerate of others' feelings. I tell jokes sometimes, and jokes can sometimes cross the line. You got to be careful. Comedians learn their audience, but I can't get a feedback, a live feedback from you. I've tried going live with this satellite connection that I've got, and it drops out too much. I can't do live on the satellite. If it didn't drop out, I could do it. But when it drops out, the connection is gone. And then I'd have to create a whole brand new video connection. And I'd have to get everybody to move over to the new one to do live. It's impractical. If I'm at my son's place, I can do live, but I'm not there long enough to do that. By the time I get there, I've already got my video done anyway. And I only use their high-speed internet to upload the video. It's problematic even uploading a video here, but I've learned the tricks to do it. So I'm content with what I've got, but it could be better. Elon Musk could go ahead and put some satellites over Georgia, and it'd probably be better. But every time I complain to them, they say, well, you've got an obstructed view. You've got to have an unobstructed view of the sky. Well, I don't live in the middle of the Arizona desert where there's no trees. I live in a picturesque area with trees surrounding me. There's a forest around me. I can't get an unobstructed view. When you're pointing to a satellite that's over Texas, it doesn't move. If you can get the signal, it's going to hold for the most part, unless you got a branch waving in front of it. But for the most part, if you can get a good clear shot from here, the southwestern sky, the big dishes will work. But Starlink is different. It's following the satellites as they cross the sky. So it's got to have a good clear view. If it goes behind a tree, it loses the satellite. Now, it tries to map where the trees are. And it does a fairly decent job. But there are times where it drops out. Mainly, I think, not because of the trees, but because the lack of coverage. The only satellites that we have are over Tennessee, and there's a lot of people there and here that are using the system, and it's overloading it. And he had the gall to up the price on it. I'm now paying $165 a month for the satellite. But without it, I'd be spending 3 times that driving into town to find a suitable place to upload my videos. I used to do that. I'd spend money on gas instead. All right. Enough chatting. You've seen Kitty. I apologize if some things I say bother you, but the Bible is supposed to bother you. It's to get you motivated, to get you to do something. It's God's word, it's not mine. When it's my word, you know it. I'm talking, I'm just generally talking like I was at the beginning. When I'm reading the Bible, I'm reading the Bible. And I put the verse in so you can follow along. I struggle a little bit sometimes with King James, but if I have my other versions, I'm okay. Until we meet in the clouds, God bless.